Hey guys, the chances are you've read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. A few years ago, I read this accompanying book called The Cashflow Quadrant. And today I'm going to speak to you about the truth about getting rich, okay? But I'm going to speak to you about it from the perspective of a framework that I came across whilst reading this book, the E.S.B.I framework. And the reason I wanted to speak to you about this is because it really introduces you to the mindset for wealth creation overall. Okay, so it's almost looking at it from the top down, looking at it from the perspective of how you might want to start to see yourself and what direction you want to start to build towards in order to build wealth and become rich if it's something you desire over time. My name's Ken of the Humble Penny and Financial Joy Academy. What we do on this channel here is to give you guys the tips, the insights, the practical hacks to help you work towards a dream life of financial independence and money joy. I'm going to walk to the end of this room now and hop over to my whiteboard and draw you this framework. And what we're going to do today is walk across what the ESBI framework is, first of all. Secondly, I'm going to go through the pros and cons of each of those segments that are necessary for becoming rich over time and building wealth. And thirdly, I want to talk to you about some real life examples, what my experience has been on this journey of wealth creation and working towards financial independence. I'll just share with you real life examples from my own life, whether, for me being an employee over time and then working my way towards becoming an investor and starting my own business and things like that, such that this can become really real for you. And you can, at the end of this video, identify where you are today on your journey towards becoming financially independent and also map out and have some ideas for where you need to be in the future in order to be able to get there a lot quicker. All right, let's dive straight in now and explore this framework and mindset for how to get rich. So to explain these quadrants as quickly as I can, I've written the various points on the board and I'm going to walk you through them in a bit more detail now. Okay, starting with the first quadrant, which is the employee quadrant. The key pros of being an employee are essentially that you have security. So you have predictability of income coming to you, as well as many other benefits such as your health insurance, for example, as well as the fact that your employer might be paying pension contributions for you. In the UK, they are a requirement for employers to pay pension contributions for their employees, okay? Those are the key benefits. The cons tied to being an employee essentially are that you're swapping time for money. That's the key thing. Here you are swapping time for money and there is no ownership whatsoever unless you are working for a company that has given you some share options. Which is a different thing. You can get them with certain companies, but not all companies offer that to their employees, okay? So you're working, swapping time for money, you have no ownership, you're typically working long hours, so between 35 and 50 to 60 hours per week, depending on what industry you work in. And in addition to that, you are paying the highest levels of taxes. Across all these various quadrants, the employee is typically paying a higher rate tax, basic rate 20%, higher rate tax 40 or 45% if you are an additional rate taxpayer. So these guys pay the highest levels of tax. Now the self-employed are very similar to the employees, but what's slightly different about them is that they've chosen to create their own jobs. So they're not quite business people per se, but they are working on their own terms. So you might be somebody who has a particular skill set and offering that skill as a service in order to generate an income. So from a pro perspective, you have certain levels of freedom as a self-employed person. You don't have complete freedom, but you have certain levels of freedom. You're still focusing on security, but you have certain levels of freedom. Other pros include the fact that you've created a job for yourself and you might have the opportunity to manage maybe one employee or two within your self-employed setup. The cons are that you are still doing a lot of what you did as an employee. In fact, in many cases, you're probably doing even more of it. You're working long hours, you're paying high taxes, you're swapping time for money in effect, and in addition to that, you're managing people. So these two groups are the least likely to build wealth over time. And that does not mean they can't build wealth, okay? Because a lot of employees build wealth, particularly those who manage over time to maximize their careers and maybe increase their income over time, keeping their lifestyles quite flat, and over time build that buffer, but therefore then take that buffer and move on to become investors. Those particular type of employees build wealth over time, or the employees I mentioned earlier who actually have a certain level of ownership, but it's only a very tiny proportion of employees out there relative to the general pool that have any form of ownership. Because the whole point of you being an employee is that you are working for somebody else. You don't have ownership. You are there specifically for income. But this other side, you're there for two main things. You're there for ownership and control. And out of that ownership and control comes a level of you building an asset base. And out of that asset base, you get two key returns. The return from the asset going up in value over time, and the returns that comes from income that you derive from that asset over time. So this right-hand side of this quadrant has a particular focus on ownership and potentially control of some form of an asset. And it's because of that that you derive various other advantages. So let's move on and talk about this side of the quadrant. On the B side, we're talking business. Okay, in the book, they refer to big business. But I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of somebody who's created a business, but that person is able to extract themselves out of that business and work on the business rather than in the business. There's a very important difference, because if you're working in the business, then you are pretty much an employee who has gone off and created a job for themselves, doing the same thing they did, but in a slightly different structure. But if you are able to work on the business and outsource a lot of the business operations to people and to technology, the combination of those two means that you can extract yourself out of the business and therefore look at the business from a top-down position and kind of observe it and work on the business. So what you find is that the business people here are typically visionaries. They spend a lot of time thinking in the future and then bringing their ideas of what the future might look like into the present domain. Okay? They also, what's interesting about this side of the quadrant is that this side of the quadrant pays a lot less in taxes. Okay? Go and look up corporation tax rates for businesses. You find that they are a lot less compared to what you are paying as an employee or as self-employed. Typically around 20% if you look at the UK, for example. Okay? In this section, as a business person, you are also able to withdraw income in a much more tax efficient manner. So rather than taking salaries as your income, you might be able to take a combination of salary up to a certain level that's tax-free and then take the rest as dividends, because those dividends attract much less tax compared to you taking those incomes as salary if you were an employee, for example. So you're paying a lot less in tax, you're withdrawing as dividends. But the key about this particular area is that the people here are typically optimizing for freedom. Okay? They're able to eject themselves and attain a level of freedom in their lives. Whereas the people here typically focus on security. It's a very important distinction. Now, the other advantage of the business domain is the deductibility of business expenses. So using the Humble Penny as an example, I'm writing on a whiteboard, I've got lighting, I've got cameras, I've got things that are helping me film and deliver this video to you as a business, as a financial education company. Those expenses are deductible business expenses. By that I mean when we generate an income through maybe advertising or sponsorships or online courses or anywhere we generate an income from, after those income we can deduct business expenses. Think of them as a way in which you are in effect getting a refund for expenses that you have incurred. You cannot do that as an employee, because as an employee, you pay your expenses out of your net income that hits your bank account. But on this side, you pay your expenses out of the business income. This is before you've got to the profit that then gets subjected to corporation tax. That's a game-changing difference, because it means that the benefits you're getting as a business owner far outweigh the benefits that you'll be getting as an employee if you compare them from a tax perspective. From a con perspective, the con to mention is that starting a business is not easy. It takes time to build a business. But in my experience, it's something that many people can get started with today, particularly in this age of the internet. There's so many things that we can all get involved with as a way to start something, perhaps as a side hustle, and over time turn it into a business, just as we've done with what we've done here at the Humble Penny. The next quadrant, this is the biggest and the most game-changing quadrant, which is the quadrant of the investor. The beauty, again, with the investor quadrant is that you have control of an asset. You invest your money, and that money returns two key returns, essentially. The return in that asset increasing in value over time, and that asset also attracting income for you in the way of dividends, for example, over time. Or if you invested in property, it generates, say, rental income for you over time. The combination of those two gives you ownership, and that ownership gives you a total return that far exceeds the level of returns that you might ordinarily generate by just earning income as an employee or as a self-employed person. Now, the key pros of being an investor are that you have money working on money for you. So as an employee, you're working, say, 9 to 5, and that's it. You've done your 8 hours per day, you go home. But with an investment, you have your money working 24/7, 365 days per year, and that money is there. And the fact that you're reinvesting the gains you're getting from there, say you're getting dividends, for example, and reinvesting them, the power of compounding gets to work and money starts to work on money. The other pro is that it's highly tax efficient, because if you generate gains by investing your money, those gains are typically subject to capital gains tax, and capital gains is taxed at a much lower percentage compared to you generating income as an employed person or as a self-employed person. So capital gains always leads to you essentially keeping more of your own money, because the tax rates that apply for capital gains are a lot lower. In this investor section, you can also invest your money in a much more tax efficient way by investing your money in accounts that essentially lead to you paying a lot less tax in a legal way over time. The con with investing money is that nothing's guaranteed, especially if you're somebody who is speculating when it comes to investing their own money. Now, thinking about these 4 quadrants from a personal perspective, I can tell you for sure, looking at my own journey, I started off as an employee, and when I read that book, I first of all read Rich Dad Poor Dad many years ago, around 2008/9, this idea stuck with me. I always knew that I wanted to be somebody who wanted ownership and a level of control of my income and of my own income generating assets. Okay, so my goal was always to move from this quadrant of being an employee, but to move that way to become a business owner ultimately, and to move that way to become an investor ultimately. And that's happened for me. And as an employee, I worked my way up from becoming a qualified accountant all the way through senior finance and becoming a chief financial officer eventually. And what that did for me from a financial independence perspective is that income increased. And as that income increased, we kept our lifestyle flat and started to build a buffer. That buffer, by us living below our means, gave us a key advantage, because then we started to think as investors. The key question an investor always asks is, what is my return on investment? They think from an ROI perspective. So as an employee, I then started to think, how could I start to derive a return on my own money? Okay, I could either use that money to put that money through, say, other assets such as property, or through the stock market, or other asset classes for that matter, which we have, such as you may be starting a digital business or starting an online business, or I can use it to start a business, as I mentioned. Use it to start something that generates 2 key returns: the capital working over time and growing in value, and it then generates income for you. You see this with property. Property values go up, rental income comes in. Okay? For example, or you invest through the stock market, that value of your shares or your funds, whatever you invest in, goes up over time, but you also generate an income by way of, say, dividends that come to you over time. So the total return that you generate in this domain here is absolutely unrivaled, because you have so much more opportunity in this area here on the right hand side to build real wealth over time, because you're not just relying on swapping your time for money, but you are really then putting on a different personality essentially and looking to have money work on money over time in order to help you build wealth, get richer over time, and accelerate your journey towards financial independence. Okay, so to wrap this video up, I've made a summary of the key points for you to bear in mind, okay? So, employee versus self-employed on the left-hand side, business and investor on the right-hand side. So these are my key points to take away. The first is, as employees, you are typically swapping time for money. As a business and as an investor, you are focused on using money to work on money, okay? Number two is that as an employee or self-employed, you typically don't have ownership and control, or as much of it as you would like, okay? As a business owner and investor, your focus really here is to have ownership and control of assets. Number three is that you pay more taxes on this side, and on this side you pay a lot less tax over time, because it's a lot more tax efficient to have your money in that area. Number four is that the focus here is typically on security. It's not exclusively, but it's typically on you achieving security through a job, for example. The focus here as a business owner and investor is that you're ultimately aiming for freedom. Now, of course, as an employee, you can aim for freedom. And this is what we teach you here, is a way for you to use the money that you're making through your day job to ultimately optimize your life for freedom, rather than just optimizing for security, as it were, okay? The next point is that as an employee, you're typically focused on income. So most people who are employees and self-employed talk about how much income they want to generate or how much income they're generating. So the focus is on income, as is point 5. But as a business owner and investor, your focus is on assets. You're looking to create assets that have the capability of building your income. So that's one part of the return you get, and the other part of the return is that you have that asset by itself growing in value over time, because you're focusing on assets on this end. The final point is that becoming an employee or even self-employed are things that we typically learn at school, okay? Learning to start your own business, to become an investor, and things that are typically not taught to us at school, okay? And what my personal journey has taught me is that I have had to learn this for myself. Becoming a business owner and investor, I've had to experience this through the line of work I've been in, through the industry I've worked in. You know, had I not met people who I could see had built real wealth, you know, real financial wealth over time by owning businesses and becoming investors, had I not seen that for myself, I would not have experienced that in reality. And also, had I not experienced that in my own family life, by seeing my parents start businesses and for those businesses to become the vehicles that liberated them and helped them to become investors into other asset classes like property and the stock market. Had I not seen that in my own life, had I not seen that in reality, I would not have actually learned it and believed that it was possible, and potentially got to the point of being able to even teach this stuff by starting this YouTube channel, as well as our blog at thehumblepenny.com. So I hope that these points that I've made, by comparing these, will help you identify where you are today. If you are an employee today or self-employed person, that does not mean that you're not going to build wealth over time. What I'm trying to teach you here is the mindset for what it will take for you to build wealth over time. These guys over here will need to, over time, build and grow their income. And by managing their lifestyles, keeping their lifestyles at a particular level, are able to build that buffer. And as they change their mindset, by watching our videos, for example, and building their own development, developing themselves personally over time, that mindset will start to change and they might find themselves therefore becoming investors and business owners over time. Okay, so I hope this summary has been somewhat inspiring because it would have given you an idea of where you are today and potentially where you want to get to on this journey of wealth building and your journey towards becoming financially independent. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video today, exploring the truth about how to get richer over time. It's become really apparent to me on a really personal level that, sticking to the right-hand side of that framework is really where one needs to be over time if they want to accelerate this journey towards becoming financially independent. Okay, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you in that framework? Are you currently an employee wanting to become an investor, or are you an employee who's currently an investor as well? Or are you an employee or a self-employed person who perhaps wants to become a business owner one day, or become an investor, or both, if that's what you desire? Please let me know in the comments. I'd love to know, what your thoughts are around that particular framework and what your life experience has been. Do you know people who have become rich over time? Have they done it as employees, or have they done it as business people or investors, or a combination of those? I'd love to know in the comments. Drop some insights into your own personal experience of this particular framework, and I'd love to jump in there and hang out with you and talk about it. Okay, if you really enjoyed this video, please make sure you hit that like button because it really helps encourage a ton more people to engage and love our videos. If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Welcome to the Humble Penny, and hit the notifications bell whilst you're at it so you get notified when we publish our videos twice a week, typically on a Tuesday as well as a Thursday. Thank you so much for watching today. I've really enjoyed talking about this topic, and I really hope it's introduced to you a mindset. That's what I really see this framework as. It's a mindset for how to build wealth over time, and I hope this mindset is one that you'll adopt and make real in your life. Okay, take care and see you on our next video. Bye-bye.